But people often ask me from the student standpoint if we're ever going to see eye to eye with mainstream science, and if anyone's making efforts to bridge those gaps between us and the mainstream scientific community. And the truth is that we're more than willing to talk to them. But when you reach a certain academic level, usually if you have a master's degree in any sort of physical science or higher, forget about PhDs, then you're so far gone. There's so much conditioning on that side. You've spent so much time in the textbooks and so much money because you know academics. When you reach a certain level, the only thing you care about is being peer reviewed and being published. And by that, published papers. And the scariest word for any academic is ostracized, because you don't want to lose your peer groups. You've spent all this time. So when you hear about flat Earth, it's an outrage. It's an insult. It's a slap in the face. And there's no way you could take a stance with us because you can't. If you did, everything you've worked for up until that point becomes irrelevant to a lesser degree. I mean, astronomy and if anybody in astronomy and astrophysics, what do you do? There's nothing you can do.
So I feel like the perception of flat Earth is typically like uninformed. It has kind of this weird pseudo-scientific perspective on things like that.
Yeah.
What do you think is like misinterpreted from there?
Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. It's weird. You could walk out in the street right now and ask anyone how they know the world's a globe. And the first thing it'll be a knee-jerk reaction. What are you talking about? We know. It's a known thing. It's like a given in algebra, right? And then you push them on it a little bit. You say, really? How do you know? Right? And then their wheels start spinning. Because then the average person realizes it's not that you don't own a rocket ship, you're not part of a space program. You were told, and your father was told, and his father before him, and so on and so on. Which is when I go to other countries, and I ask them, I say, hey, people of random country in Europe, the Americans went to the moon, right? We of course, being in America, we have to believe that. It's just part of our thing. That's what we do. Why do you think the Americans went to the moon? And they all say the same thing. They say, well, it was on your news, and your news would never lie about anything like that. And it's like, really? You think our news isn't biased in any way, shape, or form, and you don't think that there are corporate interests and there are governments above those, and you spin the stories? It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. You control the media. Just average person. You don't have to answer this, right? I'm just going to throw a series of questions, which is, how fast is the Earth spinning at its equator, supposedly? How fast is it traveling around the sun? How fast is our solar system moving sideways through the galaxy, and how fast is that galaxy, Milky Way, traveling through the rest of the universe? I know all those things. I had to relearn them when I was doing Flat Earth. What's interesting is I can ask an average audience of globalists those things. Almost none of them will know the answers to them. And yet they're still defending that model. And so I'll come back and it's like, why are you defending a model where you don't even know the details of it? You just know the very, very broad strokes. And by that, I mean the average person on the street can't even name the 9 planets. The only reason they're attacking us is because they saw a globe that was put in their classroom in first grade, and it stayed in the corner of the classroom. Every classroom's got one, for whatever reason. And it sits there in the corner of the classroom until you graduate from high school. That's bare minimum. That's 12 years of conditioning. It's usually right below the American flag. And the American flag sitting there, that's for a reason. There's people that join the military partly because they've seen the American flag so many times. And then, when it comes to the globe, oh yeah, I'm willing to defend that. The idea of the globe. Why? Because it's been sitting in my classroom. I have no reason. It is straight up traditional conditioning, which is the problem is then once academics reach a certain level, we're reaching up, right, to them. It's like, olive branch in hand saying, hey, you want to talk to us about this? And they're saying, no, flat Earth is beneath us in every aspect you can think of. Therefore, we're not going to talk to you. And I've even warned people in the simplest of terms. I said, look, if you don't come up with an easier way to explain the solar system model, you're going to lose by attrition. Which is in high school, look, band and football and basketball and baseball and ASB club and whatever clubs there are nowadays, they're all pretty big. Math club and physics club, pretty damn small.
I guess when did what was like the life altering event that kind of turned you towards this community? Like what do you think?
I had looked at just about every conspiracy there was, and I had an opinion on it, as I mentioned earlier. And then I looked at this one. I was like, it's a piece of crap. I should be able to knock it out in a weekend. And I hate unresolved, nagging issues like that. So I hammered on this thing, and a weekend turned into a month, which turned into 9 months. And then after those 9 months, I gave up. And I said, okay, for whatever reason, I want to prove the globe in a court of law. I can't do it. That's when I started making content, and I put put all my information out there, doxed myself immediately, and said, okay, Internet Hive Mind, tell me where I screwed up. Tell me how I messed this thing up, because I'm going flat now. And somebody bring me back to the globe. And no one could. In fact, most people didn't even try. And in fact, I had subject matter experts from the military and aviation that were calling me up immediately, and surveyors, you name it. I've got a great list on my channel. They start calling me and saying, hey, you're not nuts. Here's why. And we're going to add to it. And people just kept tacking on and tacking on and tacking on. I was waiting for just even a single academic to contact me. Of course, they wouldn't, because it's beneath them. And after 6 months, it was like, wow, that's it. I couldn't go back now if I tried. Once I started to see the game, how it's played, and the space program and NASA, and how the Americans fooled everybody, which was great. It was brilliant. It was a great plan, and their timing was good, and it worked for a long time. But now it's getting long in the tooth. And now they don't know what to do. And so, which is why the Artemis program is just in shambles. I mean, we're so hungry still that anytime NASA does anything, and I called it, we can predict stuff even before it happens. It's like, oh yeah, when they get to the moon, like Artemis was going to do a flyby, right? They're going to crank down the resolution, make it so freaking grainy that that no one's going to be able to identify anything. And we were taking better shots of the moon from here. Right, if you believe in the 240,000 miles, we'll just round it up, 240,000 miles away, we're getting better images from here. They've got a capsule that's 50 miles away from the moon, and we can't even tell what kind of craters there are from there. Not to mention, there's never stars, by the way, in space. But that's, by the way, stuns me, which is like, okay, so there's no stars in the Apollo missions. You can blame it on exposure settings all day long, right? It's like, well, it was a camera exposure setting. It's like, really? All the rolls of film, you didn't want to change exposure settings ever? But now, there's no film anymore. It's all digital. I mean, we've got cameras of the gods now. We can crank any level of resolution and any contrast. We can do it. We can do thermal, anything you want. No stars in space, ever. Well, that's weird because I can walk outside, there's stars all day long. But apparently, when you're flying around the moon, even though it should be absolutely beautiful, especially when you're on the dark side, there's no stars. So no, Artemis is, and I said, look, Artemis 1 is going to be a disaster. Artemis 2 is going to be kicked down the road. And they did. They kicked it down immediately. They not even 2024, 25, 2026. That's what we're thinking about doing Artemis 2. It's like, oh, here's the crew that we're going to use. Really? You're going to tell us in 26 that you're actually going to use the same crew? No. Elon Musk, I remember 2017 when he said, oh yeah, I'm going to send a crew around the moon, do a flyby in 2018. Middle of 2018, I'm going, and I knew at that point, I knew timetables. It's like, wait a minute, that's not even 18 months from now. You don't even have a rocket. And you're making this claim? Never happened. It's 2024. Never happened. The guy is a freaking puppet for big state, deep state, whatever you want to call it. Most of our community is still in the closet, meaning because of friends and family and coworkers, most of the people that are out there can't even talk about flat Earth because they're afraid of being that guy or that person. If you want to get a chance, look up a Fox article that came out just a couple days ago where they were talking to Travis and the Kelsey brothers. They were asking about how many guys in the NFL are in flat Earth, and they said, oh yeah, like at least 20% of the NFL is into flat Earth, but they can't talk about it because they're afraid of, you want to be that guy in the locker room that gets that label put on you. It's tough. I've gotten so many emails. I've been doing this for 9 years, and still most of the people I know, friends of mine, some family, some people that I used to go to school with back in the day, it's like, oh yeah, I'm totally into it. Can't talk about it. Well, I'm a little more, I wouldn't say immune, but resistant to it than most. So the peer pressure thing really doesn't affect me. I'm Gen X. Gen X really doesn't care that much about peer pressure anymore.